Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Walter Brennan was one of the most dangerous actors who ever lived. One of the most dangerous weapons is not a gun or a knife, but a skilled actor when audiences believe their character, as real as Walter Brennan, reportedly danced a jig and screamed at the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Why was Walter Brennan Hollywood's most hawkish conservative? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. How could an actor win 3 Oscars in 5 years yet be all but forgotten? Overexposure and late career typecasting as a cranky or kindly grandpa ultimately clouded character actor Walter Brennan's important contributions to some of Hollywood's better Golden Age films. He was a great character actor of old Hollywood, someone you might not know the name of, but if you've seen any Western movie, you probably recognise his face. He often played the older, crotchety type characters. He was great also in To Have and Have Not, with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, where he played Bogey's drunk best friend. He was an American actor who, although destined never to be a leading man, became one of the most successful supporting actors of Hollywood's Golden Age. He often played the comic relief role of the old-timer sidekick, particularly in westerns. In Sergeant York he played a great role as a pastor, but he was someone who still holds the record for having the most Best Supporting Actor Oscars to his name. He won 3 in his career, and he often played characters who were much older than he was. In World War I he fought, and he had his voice ruined by mustard gas, and then in 1932 he was in an accident where he lost all his teeth. So when he took out his dentures and had his great gravelly voice, he could play these older characters. Damaged vocal cords allowed him to play elderly men while still in his 40s, which Brennan imbued with a rascally charm that made him an immediate favourite among moviegoers. For better or for worse, Brennan is chiefly remembered today almost exclusively as a gimpy, toothless, grizzled old Western sidekick. In reality, he had a much vaster range. He played all sorts of roles. Even within the Western genre, he was versatile. Some of his best roles were scary villains as opposed to comical codgers. He was born Walter Andrew Brennan on 25th of July 1894 in Lynn, Massachusetts, the second of 3 children, into an Irish immigrant family. His mother, Margaret Elizabeth, and William John Brennan, an engineer. His father encouraged his son to follow in his footsteps, so young Walter studied engineering at Ringe Technical High School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. While in school he became interested in acting. He began to perform in vaudeville at the age of 15. After leaving school he worked in a bank, but this was interrupted by the outbreak of World War I. Like any other successful person in his or her own field, Brennan underwent a variety of odd jobs. He worked as a bank clerk before being drafted into the US Army. He joined up and was sent as a private to France in the 101st Field Artillery Regiment. He returned home and settled in Boston, where he worked as a journalist in finance on a local newspaper. He raised pineapples in Guatemala and worked in the real estate business, which he was quite successful until the Great Depression made him lose a great deal of his fortunes. After years of uncredited work in the silent film industry of the 1920s, actor Walter Brennan finally got his break as silent films were giving way to newfangled talking motion pictures. It was a break the young actor seized for all he was worth and, for the next 45 years, would make the most of. The Depression was actually the one that paved Brennan the way for his full-time acting career. Finding himself broke, Brennan had to take jobs by appearing as an extra and then acting in bit parts as many films as he could, including Texas Cyclone and Two-Fisted Law, with another newcomer to Hollywood, John Wayne. His first role was an uncredited one in the silent film Lorraine of the Lions in 1925. Some of his earliest appearances include The Invisible Man, Woman Haters, and Bride of Frankenstein, the last mentioned film where he finally got to speak his lines for the first time, albeit briefly. He also worked as a stuntman. During those ensuing years he became one of the greatest character actors in Hollywood history, and between 1936 and 1942. Over the years, with his craggy voice and unmistakable laugh, he supplied support to some of the biggest names in film, including Gary Cooper, John Wayne, Spencer Tracy, Barbara Stanwyck, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Brennan consummated mastery of virtually every kind of role, while playing against and often stealing scenes from those and other luminary stars. By the 1930s his acting had become more and more recognised, and he had begun to accept substantial roles. He soon became a fixture of screen westerns. Already lanky, balding and sporting his quavering voice, he received his big break in 1935's The Wedding Night, which was intended as a vehicle for its star Anna Sten. However, audiences were more impressed with Brennan's comic turn as an eccentric cab driver, so much that he was soon signed to a contract with producer Samuel Goldwyn. This was capped by his first Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in the 1936 film Come and Get It. Since then his film work had been steady most of the time. The win boosted him to the inner circle of Hollywood character actors, where he worked steadily with such directors as John Ford in Three Godfathers, Fritz Lang in Fury, and Cecil B. DeMille in The Buccaneer, playing colourful sage advisors to the film's leads, or prickly older men who could be swayed by appealing to their better nature. In 1938 he won his second Oscar as Loretta Young's embittered uncle, who overcame his grievances towards her beau, Richard Greene, after he trained their horse to win the Kentucky Derby. After enjoying substantive roles in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle, and Northwest Passage, Brennan captured his third Academy Award as Judge Roy Bean, the notorious real-life hanging judge of the American West, whose iron-fisted rule was challenged by drifter Gary Cooper in The Westerner. Though Cooper was initially reluctant to take the part, fearing that he would be overshadowed by Brennan's performance, the two actors made for such an effective screen team that they appeared together in 4 subsequent films, including Meet John Doe, Sergeant York, which earned Cooper the Oscar and Brennan his 4th nomination, and Pride of the Yankees. By this point Brennan was so well regarded by critics and audiences that he became one of the first character players to move up to a leading role, playing a fugitive who befriended young Dana Andrews in Jean Renoir's American feature debut, Swamp Water. However, he was soon back in character parts, lending expert support as Humphrey Bogart's alcoholic sidekick in To Have and Have Not, and stealing scenes from Bob Hope, no easy task, as a dim-witted but loyal tattooist in The Princess and the Pirate. In 1946 he played against type as the genuinely frightening old man Clanton, leader of the brutish Rustler family, who faced down Wyatt Earp, Henry Fonda, at the OK Corral in My Darling Clementine. He was a constant presence in A-picture westerns throughout the late 40s and early 50s, giving expert turns opposite John Wayne in John Ford's Red River and Kirk Douglas. There were occasional forays to the modern day, most notably as a sympathetic town doctor in John Sturgis's Bad Day at Black Rock, but for the most part Brennan was as essential a part of the Hollywood Western as Monument Valley, Horses and Sagebrush. In 1957 he moved to television to play the patriarch of a sprawling mountain family in the comedy The Real McCoys, which proved to be one of the more well-loved projects of his entire career. The 63-year-old Brennan found himself not only more popular than ever, but in high demand again as a character player. He re-teamed with John Wayne for one of his best roles as the gimpy but determined deputy in Howard Hawks's Rio Bravo. He even enjoyed a brief but improbably successful second career as a recording artist. He even had a hit record, the spoken-sung Old Rivers, which first charted on April 7, 1962, spent 11 weeks on the Billboard charts and peaked at number 5. This led to several albums of similar material and 3 other top 100 singles. He easily made the transition from film to television with The Real McCoys and was the subject of a Norman Rockwell painting that drew upon his unique roles in Western films. he had remained consistently active on film since the silent era and continued to land major supporting roles in features throughout the 1960s. In addition to his successful screen career, Brennan was one of Hollywood's wealthiest performers. He had continued to invest in real estate after his initial failure in the 1920s, including a 12,000-acre ranch in North California, overseen by his sons Arthur and actor-producer-director Andrew. He also reaped significant rewards from the real McCoys through his partnership with producer Irving Pincus. But in addition to his financial status, he had also developed a reputation as one of the entertainment industry's most hawkish conservatives. During the 1960s, Brennan was convinced that the anti-war and civil rights movements were being run by overseas communists. In interviews, he voiced his belief that communist forces were behind the civil rights and anti-war movements, and reportedly expressed glee on the set of his final series, The Guns of Will Sonnet, upon hearing the news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Walter Brennan misused his fake image as a kindly countrified hillbilly — he was from Massachusetts and was an old-school Yankee — to sell his John Birch Society ideals, anti-civil rights, bigotry, hatred to unsuspecting fans in the 1960s. It was bone-chilling. His beliefs were hidden behind his cuddly, avuncular character that people adored. Brennan was a financially astute graduate engineer who was so far right he had a deep belief that John Wayne was a communist, and he implored his daughter not to give his grandchildren Beatles records lest they be infected by decadent modernity. He had little use for reprobates. He refused to have anything to do with Ward Bond, for instance, because of Bond's alcoholism and general loutish behaviour, and he turned down the part of Jeter Lester in Tobacco Road because of the character's shiftlessness. As Brennan grew more successful, he became nearly as famous for his political conservatism as for his acting, eventually embodying the baroque paranoia of a character in Dr. Strangelove. A member of the John Birch Society, Brennan had a bunker on his Los Angeles estate, fully outfitted with firearms and survival supplies, awaiting the Russian invasion. In his later years, he was known to canvass co-workers about their voting habits, and if they did anything so radical as vote for a Democrat, he would bewail his country's impending misfortune. In 1972, he supported the presidential campaign of ultra-conservative California Congressman John Schmidt over that man of Richard M. Nixon, whom he believed was too moderate a Republican. He continued working into the mid-1970s, joining the cast of the failed family sitcom To Roam with Love in its final season. He made his final screen appearance in Smoke in the Wind, a low-budget western co-directed by his son. Still active into his seventh decade, Brennan died in 1974, leaving behind a storied legacy of screen roles that enshrined him as one of the most memorable character actors in Hollywood history. Shortly before his death, the New York Times reported Brennan preferring working in his 70s and was eager for what the future held for him. "I'd rather do television than movies because there aren't any long layoffs between working days," he remarked. "You make a movie and then wait around for another good part. Not on television. You go to work 5 days a week for most of the year. That's what I like. By Sunday night I can hardly wait to get started on Monday morning. It's a shame most people don't feel the same way about their jobs. Heck, I never wanted anything out of this business except a good living. Never wanted to be a star or a glamorous figure. Just wanted to be good at what I was doing." If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Walter Brennan? Walter Brennan enjoyed a 4-decade career, playing colourful, often sage older men, in a vast array of legendary films.